All right, we've got all sorts of companies from Calvin Klein, Bud Light, Target. These are some of the bigger ones, perhaps, but they're just a few out of many recent corporations to fall on their face while trying to push a woke indoctrination on their customers. And of course, Bud Light has suffered catastrophic losses in profits and have actually become some sort of punchline to the whole sort of jokes and, frankly, what ought to be a negative model to other corporations. So the question is corporate America ever going to learn? But more importantly, what are the lessons here for churches and for Christians? What lessons should we be learning as we are trying to influence wokeism ourselves? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Pastor Lucas Miles. He hosts the Epoch Times program Church and State with Lucas Miles. He's also the author of the new book, Woke Jesus, The False Messiah Destroying Christianity. He's also a faculty member at Summit Ministries. So, Pastor Lucas, welcome back to Washington Watch. Glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, it's our privilege. All right, we've got this. What an enormous topic here. It's kind of like where do we begin? But we look at the activism, the corporate activism that we've recently watched from one big company after another. Have you ever seen anything like this? What's your take on it all?
Look, I think we have companies like Target and others that are profiteering off of the mental health crisis with our America's youth. And, it's very interesting. It's easy to look at them and go, what are they thinking? Don't they know what this is going to do? And there's part of me that's starting to really believe that this is all part of the plan. That this is all part of this dismantling of just the American way of life that the radical left has been so intent on for so long, that's driven by this Marxist substructure that we have. And because it's one company after another, from Adidas to Ford to many others, Levi's, Calvin Klein. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, so I think you bring up a great point that needs to be questioned. Are these companies that blind and that disconnected with America, or are they willing to take a profit loss for the sake of pushing a political agenda? Is that what you're beginning to question yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that there is, there are likely other benefits for these companies in doing this. There's no reason logically that companies that have thrived on capitalism for so long, that are really some of the mainstay corporations in America, would all jump off of a cliff, with decisions like this pushing wokeness. There has to be other benefits for them. So whether that's, backroom deals or some other sort of, things related to ESG, I don't know. But I think that all of us in America, we need to be asking these questions to really get to the bottom of what's actually going on here, because I don't believe their marketing departments are that bad.
Hey, great point. And you raise all sorts of questions in my mind that just start exploding while you go down this path. I think there needs to be some sort of investigative reporting or something to try to get to the bottom of that. But if we can, let's move on. Your new book, the Woke Jesus, The False Messiah Destroying Christianity. Tell me a little bit about that. What inspired you to write this? What is the message that you're wanting to get across?
Yeah, Woke Jesus is essentially what I wanted to become is the definitive resource for understanding wokeism and how it's affected the church. I start in the 1700s and kind of work our way forward. And arguably, I start even earlier than that with taking an in-depth look at Gnosticism and seeing the connections between that and really some of these modern iterations that we see of wokeness. But we connect the dots. I start in the foreword to the book. I quote the early church father Irenaeus. And one of the things that he said in his book Against Heresies is that the reason he wrote that book in the 2nd century is because he saw the church in the 1st century struggle to defeat Gnosticism. And he said it was because they didn't understand it fully. So he wrote a resource trying to help the church understand it. It's really with that same spirit that I put out Woke Jesus. I want the church to understand wokeism. I want them to understand what's happening with this sexualized revolution that we're seeing in transgenderism, so that they can begin to learn how to really dismantle these beliefs, refute them, and then obviously present the truth of the true biblical Christ.
And how to guard themselves from falling off the same cliff. It's a disturbing trend that we have many churches, even denominations, organizations, academic institutions that were founded truly on biblical principles that tend to be embracing little by little and some by huge strides this woke Christianity, if we can even describe it that way. Progressive Christians, woke Christians, making the case, many of them, that Jesus himself was woke. Is there any support whatsoever to support that type of argument?
Look, wokeism is antithetical to the gospel 100%. It's interesting. We've always had heresies in Christianity. The last 2,000 years, we could point to all sorts of them. What's different today is that we're seeing heresy funded by the radical left. We're seeing donations be made to, major Christian nonprofits and Christian universities in order to get them to really slowly navigate or drift away from their founding principles and take on or maybe stop talking about certain issues. Like, if we give you this grant, would you be willing to maybe talk about, this traditional marriage less or gender a little bit less? And so there's been a lot of financial pressure that's been placed on the church. What I can say is this, is that one of the reasons that I believe things like wokeism or sort of a counterpart to that is critical race theory are so antithetical to the gospel is they actually rob people of their ability to be able to suffer for Christ. If you're a woke Christian, if we can call it that, you can't suffer for Jesus. You can't be persecuted for your faith. Why? Because all persecution is a result of your race, your skin color, your socioeconomic status, your country of origin, your immigration status. It's never for the sake of the gospel. And this is one of many reasons I believe that wokeism contradicts the teachings of Jesus and the teachings that we see in the New Testament.
Great point. And you really raise another thought with me, this whole concept of what is becoming a popular term now, phraseology of Christian nationalism. How does this fit into the broader picture?
Look, there are those that are conservative that have sort of embraced this accusation of Christian nationalists. They're saying, I love God, I love my country. If you want to call me a Christian nationalist, then I'll embrace it. I take a little bit of different perspective on that in the book Woke Jesus. One of the things that I look to is really understanding the reason why the left are calling Christians Christian nationalists. I believe it's a dog whistle. I believe that they're trying to get people to associate evangelical, Bible-believing Christians with Nazi Germany, one place in history that we see Christian nationalism really front and center. So what I always tell people is let's go there. Let's go to Nazi Germany and look at what happened. In Nazi Germany during the Third Reich, there were two main churches. There was the professing church, which, heroes of the faith like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Karl Barth were part of. And there was also the German church, which became known as the German Nazified church. And that church was the church that actually abandoned Orthodox Christian teaching and exchanged, as our friend Eric Metaxas likes to say, they exchanged the Bible for Mein Kampf and the cross for the swastika. They are the true Christian nationalists in that situation. It wasn't the evangelical Bible-believing church. In America, the same is true. The evangelicals that love God and country, they're just doing what good Christians do. They become good citizens in their nation. They follow God and they follow the authorities that have been established by God. What we're seeing on the radical left, though, in Christian progressive churches is what we're seeing is that they are willing to set aside a biblical agenda in order to bow to the state. There's no difference between the agenda of the progressive church or woke Christians and the Biden administration right now when it comes to marriage, sexuality, gender, immigration, open borders, socialism. They have the exact same perspective. Why? Because the radical left church has bowed their knee to the state.
Wow, extremely well said. I remember being on the House floor shortly after January 6th, that infamous day, and Speaker Pelosi at the time literally made the statement referring to the U.S. Capitol, specifically the People's House, where she referred to the House as the temple of democracy. And I think we often look at the left as godless, without morals. And to some extent, that may be true, but there appears to be more to it than that. This godliness is actually, this progressivism, as you describe it, it is itself becoming a form of religious devotion. How do we wrap our minds around this?
Yeah, and I go through this in detail in my book, Woke Jesus. I really show that ultimately wokeism is a religion, and it's a religion it's undergirded with Marxism, it's undergirded with Gnostic thought. I actually think that this is perhaps one of the keys to defeating it. Now, I would have to, probably defer to some of our great legal conservative minds in this nation for really what our options are in this. But what I see right now, just at a pastoral level, is I see a government that is preferring one religion over another. In fact, the United States Constitution, the way that I understand it and read it, should not give preference to one religion over another. But what I am seeing is that wokeism is given preference, that DEI ideology is given preference, that critical race theory is given preference, that BLM is given preference in our nation. And I believe that all of these ideologies have a religious substructure to them, and they're not necessarily worshiping, the same God that we are, or a God in the traditional sense, but they have a religious adherence to statism, to Marxism, and that, from my estimation, as somebody who's been studying religion my entire life, is in fact a religion. And so my hope is that at some point that we're able to call the wokeism what it really is. It's a false religion. And I think that in doing so, it might actually empower people to be able to push this out of the state house more than it is right now, because obviously it's been given free rein.
Pastor Lucas Miles, I think you're spot on with that. And, so here we find ourselves caught in this, not caught because we're conquerors through Christ, but we are in the midst of a spiritual battle, combating, among other things, wokeness theology, if we can put it within that context. And you have done a great job drawing our attention to a well-known passage of Scripture, the armor of God in Ephesians chapter 6. What are some lessons that we as believers in this context, environment in which we are living today, what are some lessons that we need to draw from Ephesians 6?
When you think about Ephesians 6, I think for many people, it's sort of regulated to a Sunday school lesson for kids. You see the kids come out of a kids' church on a Sunday morning, and they've made out of cardboard and colored, all the different attributes of the armor of God that we see listed in Ephesians 6. And what I always try to remind people is that Ephesians 6 was written by Paul, the apostle to the church as a whole. It wasn't just written for the Sunday school class. And we are called all as believers to put on the armor of God. This is why I think it's so important. I actually believe that the armor does exactly what Paul intended for it to do, and that is it helps us defend ourselves from false beliefs. If you put on the helmet of salvation, what does that tell you? It reminds you that you have been saved, that you're not entitled to salvation, but that it is a free gift by grace through faith that has been imparted unto you. If you put on the breastplate of righteousness, you're reminded that righteousness and holiness matter, and also that righteousness was a gift for us on the cross, that I don't have an innate righteousness all of my own. If you put on the belt of truth, you're reminded that there is a thing called truth. There is an absolute truth, an authoritative truth. I just did some work with Dr. George Barna and others for a new book called Helping Millennials Thrive. And some of the research coming out of Barna and in the Arizona Christian University group they're finding that the percentage of pastors even today that believe that the Word of God is still the authority, that the Bible is the inerrant Word of God, has dropped just really a depressing number. It's below, I think, 24, 25% now. And so when we see that, we have to remember, when we put on that belt of truth, that truth is real. It's not my truth. It's not your truth. It is the truth, and that truth is the Word of God. Lastly, we have our feet fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace. What does that mean? It means that evangelism matters. We can turn away from this nonsense of Christian universalism, that everybody's saved, regardless of what they believe. And it's so important that we put this armor on so we can stand against these false doctrines that are being presented by this woke gospel.
Outstanding. All right, we've got less than 2 minutes left. I want to get to some practical, what do we do? Let's begin with pastors. You've got a pledge that you are presenting to pastors, and then transition to what can biblically minded Christians do to combat wokeism. About a minute and a half.
Yep. So we have a new platform called AmericanPastorProject.org, AmericanPastorProject.org. And this is a place where pastors can go and sign a digital signatory as a commitment to biblical orthodoxy. It's based upon the Nicene Creed, Apostles' Creed, historic Christianity. It should work for any denomination. And then also there's a commitment in there to stand against wokeism at your local church. And basically this is the goal of this is to eradicate wokeism in America. And I believe the church has to take a stand. Along with this, we have regular conference calls for pastors, opportunities for to connect with other like-minded pastors in their area, hearing from national thought leaders. And so I want to encourage any pastor to go there and sign it. If you're not a pastor, go see if your pastor has signed it. There's a church locator. You can ask your pastor about it. You can ask your pastor to sign it. If your pastor won't sign it, there's a good chance you might be in a woke church, and it might be time to find a new place to worship.
Okay, so where do people go? Where do pastors go for that? And what can Christians do to combat this? 30 seconds.
Yeah, so they can go to AmericanPastorProject.org to find out more, or you can visit lucasmiles.org if you want to order Woke Jesus or wherever books are sold.
All right, and Christians need to be praying right now, and they need to be encouraging their pastors to stand in the pulpit and preach what the Bible has to say about the issues that are infecting our culture and our society today.
Absolutely. Look, I'm an optimist. God wins in the end. It doesn't mean the church in America always thrives, though. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to keep at it.
But we win in the end. Pastor Lucas Miles, thank you so much for joining us on Washington Watch this evening.
Thanks for having me.